Hello and welcome. I'm Pallavi Sharma and you're watching BIZWORLD Weekly, a show where we bring you the top stories of the week from across the world, unfiltered and to the point. Let's start with the market check. Indian equity indices ended lower for a second consecutive session on August 1st, marking the fifth week of losses. At close, the Sensex was down 0.72% at 80,599.91 points, and Nifty was down 0.82% at 24,565.35 points. The broader indices underperformed, with BSE Mid-Cap Index down 1.3% and Small Cap Index down by 1.6%. The biggest Nifty losers were Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's Labs, Adani Enterprises, Tata Steel and Cipla, while the gainers included Trent, Asian Paints, Hero MotoCorp, HUL and Nestle. Except FMCG, all other sectoral indices ended in red, with Auto, Realty, Pharma, IT, Metal, Oil and Gas and PSU Bank down up to 2%. Indian rupee ended higher at 87.52 per dollar on Friday. It's August 1st, the much-awaited tariff deadline is here and countries are bracing for the tariffs imposed by the US. Trump has released a new list like the last one, but this time it shows bias to those who kneel. Let's take a look at this new tariff list. Afghanistan faces 15% tariffs, Algeria at 30%, Bangladesh at 20%, Bosnia and Herzegovina at 30%, Botswana at 15%, Brazil at 10%, Brunei at 25%, Canada at 35%, EU at 15%, Fiji at 15%, India at 25%, Indonesia at 19%, Iraq at 35%, Israel at 15%, Japan at 15%, Kazakhstan at 25%, Laos at 40%, Libya at 30%, Malaysia at 19%, Mauritius at 15%, Moldova at 25%, Mozambique at 15%, Myanmar at 40%, New Zealand at 15%, Pakistan at 19%, Philippines at 19%, Serbia at 35%, South Africa at 30%, South Korea at 15%, Sri Lanka at 20%, Switzerland at 39%, Syria at 41%, Thailand at 19%, Turkey at 15%, UK at 10% and Vietnam at 20%. Now, if you look at this list, you know that India is in a bad shape here because most of South Asian countries have lower tariff and that makes Indian goods less competitive in the market, meaning Indian goods will now be costing more in the US markets, triggering people to buy less Indian goods. This is the first worry for India. Second, Indian economy will be impacted due to lesser exports and more tariffs. India-US trade stands at $130 billion. India exports $88 billion worth of goods to US and imports only $42 billion worth goods. These exports are 17% of India's total and 2.2% of India's GDP. As per GTRI report, Indian exports could shrink 12 to 18% due to this. Sectors like telecom, electronics, gems and jewelry, food and agricultural goods, textile and more will be impacted sharply due to these hiked tariffs. And third, on top of this 25%, which includes Russia's penalty, there are also auto tariffs and steel and aluminium and copper tariffs. But well, what happened to that negotiation lasting for months? All that just for 1% concession? Well, the US said that the issues with India are complex and cannot be solved in a day. And well, India has responded to. India has said that it has taken a note and is considering and studying the implications of these tariffs. It further said that the two countries have been engaged in ongoing trade negotiations aimed at concluding fair, balanced and mutually beneficial agreement. So they are looking at a long-term deal. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal in a statement said that any deal will be in India's interest and will protect farmers, Indian businesses and MSMEs. But what are these issues that India and US are facing? India is ready to open up its market to an extent, but Trump wants more. He wants zero tariffs on goods imported from the US and wants to impose tariffs on goods that US imports from India. That's more cost for Indian businesses. The exports will get expensive. But the problem is most countries have already agreed to Trump's tariffs and has knelt in front of Trump. India still wants to protect its interest, and meanwhile it is diversifying trade and having deals with the UK and upcoming deal with the Europe. But Trump's tariffs also mean bad for the US, especially for the common American. He imposes tariffs and shows good numbers, saying that he has almost eliminated the trade deficit with most countries. But at what cost? An average American. A Yale report suggests that Americans will face a surge in household expenses and slowdown in the economic growth of the US due to these tariffs. In an average, it would result in a short-term income loss of about $2,400 per American household. Tariffs are expected to drive up prices of goods like shoes, handbags, textiles, medicines, and more. More job losses, slow GDP growth is what economists are expecting after these tariff announcements. Tariffs were supposed to narrow the trade deficit, but firms are just importing now to escape tariffs, and exports have barely moved, researchers say. So it does not look good for both countries, and it's better to find a middle ground and seal a deal as soon as possible instead of Trump targeting India with statements like dead economy. Because if a deal is not cracked, the only thing dead would be Trump's approval rating, and that's already dying, by the way. This week, the US president unleashed massive attacks on India. First, he said that India would face a 25% tariff and a penalty over Russia from August 1st. Then he announced a deal with Pakistan, a deal where US would help develop Pakistan's massive oil reserves. We'll tell you about that later. But then comes a massive blow. He called India's economy dead. Listen to this carefully. I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care. We have done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. This was the statement from the US president. So first, let's give Trump a reality check, and then let's talk about the tariffs. Let's talk numbers, which Trump might not understand, because when he was asked about calculation on tariff rates, he said it was based on common sense, and then released a complex formula that even he would not understand. Coming back to the point, here's why India is not a dead economy. India is the fastest growing economy in the world. IMF projects a 6.4% growth rate for both 2025 and 2026. It is the fourth largest economy in the world. India is fast becoming a global manufacturing hub, overtaking China in smartphone exports to who? The US. India's exports soared to record highs in FY25, growing 76% in the past decade. India is a magnet for FDIs and a leader in digital payments revolution. So yes, we know that you are not good at maths, but this is pretty straightforward. Now coming to India's relations with Russia. More than a third of India's total oil imports have come from the OPEC Plus producer, up from earlier's 1% before the war. Here's how this happened. India's purchases of Russian crude climbed to their highest levels in nearly a year in June. This came as domestic refiners built up stocks amid rising tensions in West Asia due to the Israel-Iran conflict, when the prices hit record highs. As per some reports, India imported 2.08 million barrels per day of Russian crude in June, the highest volume since July 2024, and all this to protect the economy from inflation that the world witnessed during these wars. But here's the reality check once again. India buys cheap oil from Russia, refines it in the country, and guess who buys the cheap refined oil from India? the Europe, US and others. In fact, Netherlands is one of the largest buyers of India's refined oil that is originally from Russia. In 2024, EU countries collectively purchased $25 billion worth of Russian fossil fuels, more than the $22 billion aid that they provided to Ukraine. But they get a 15% tariff and no penalty because they are Europe and have decided to invest $600 billion in the US while India foots the bill. How is that fair? It's a classic case of weaponizing tariffs and bullying, and India will not take it anymore. China's overall factory activity has deteriorated in July as a softening of new business growth led manufacturers to scale back production. The S&P Global China General Manufacturing PMI fell to 49.5 in July from 50.4 in June. Now, India has also surpassed China to become the largest exporter of smartphones to the US. Here's a report to explain more.
For the first time ever, India has surged past China to become the #1 exporter of smartphones to the United States. Between April and June 2025, smartphones made in India accounted for a staggering 44% of all US imports, leapfrogging China, whose share collapsed to just 25% from 61% a year ago. That's a nearly 240% year-on-year production boom for India, a figure almost unheard of in tech manufacturing circles. What fueled this? The answer is Apple. Squeezed by US-China trade tensions and the threat of steep tariffs, Apple accelerated its China Plus One strategy, shifting production lines and supply chains out of China and into India. Smartphones, especially iPhones, assembled in India are now filling American shelves at record rates. Competitors like Samsung and Motorola are also expanding their Indian operations. But Apple's pivot was the catalyst. They plan for up to 25% of all iPhones to be made in India in the years ahead. But why this shift happened? Ongoing disputes and tariff threats between the US and China have made Chinese exports riskier and costlier for global companies. COVID-era disruptions and political uncertainty forced tech giants to hedge their manufacturing bets, finding new hubs beyond China. Major incentives from the Indian government and improvements in infrastructure helped companies like Apple set up large-scale assembly and export operations rapidly. In a symbolic move, Apple is closing its Parkland Mall store in Dalian, China, its first ever retail shutdown in the country since debuting there in 2008. The reason? Starkly declining foot traffic and broader struggles among high-end retailers, with brands like Michael Kors and Armani also fleeing the mall. But this isn't just about one struggling location. It's a sign of a deeper challenge. Apple's market share in China is shrinking, now outpaced by local giants like Huawei, Vivo, Oppo, and Xiaomi. Fierce competition, cheaper alternatives, and economic headwinds in China have dented Apple's sales for 6 straight quarters, dropping revenue in Greater China by nearly 10% since 2022. Despite the closure, Apple insists it remains committed to the Chinese market and will actually open a new store in Shenzhen.
Pakistan is back in news. This time it's oil. No, it's not about rising fuel prices or smuggling from Iran this time. It is about massive oil reserves that Trump suddenly wants to monetize. After selling a Nobel Prize dream to Trump, now Pakistan seems to have sold oil to him, and allegedly Pakistan has massive oil reserves. But where? And if it does have massive oil reserves, why is the country paying 272 rupees for a liter of petrol? Shouldn't it be a rich country already? Maybe it does not have the capability to drill. But wouldn't China have tapped this opportunity already if it existed? So what is this massive oil reserve Trump talking about? Let's figure out. So Trump says that US has concluded a deal where Islamabad and Washington will work together to develop Pakistan's massive oil reserve and to rub it further on India after the 25% tariff announcement. He said, and I quote, Who knows, maybe they will sell to India someday. So now let's talk about numbers, because seems like Trump needs a lot of reality checks as he announces back-to-back deals with the Delulu land. In March 2019, Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, announced a possible massive find offshore. It was touted as Asia's largest oil and gas reserves. Hours after the announcement, the Petroleum Division apparently denied it, saying that the drill did not yield the desired results. Now, this is a 2024 report in Karachi's own Dawn newspaper. It clearly says that ExxonMobil, Pakistan Petroleum Limited, ENI, and Oil and Gas Development Company drilled beyond 5,500 meters but did not find a single drop of oil, so the work was abandoned. Now coming to the real numbers. Pakistan's proven oil reserves are estimated approximately at 353.5 million barrels as of 2016. Sounds massive? Well, it is not. Pakistan ranks 52nd on the list of countries with petroleum in the world. It is just 0.021% of the global reserves. At the current consumption rate, Pakistan wouldn't last 2 years without oil imports, with the reserve that Trump is calling massive. In fact, India has more. It is the world's third largest consumer of crude oil and has around 4.9 billion barrels of oil reserves, ranking among the top 25 globally. What's worse for Pakistan is that the most of its oil reserves is in Balochistan, which is a conflicted area, and security is a major concern there for global companies. Even Chinese officials are not secure in that area. In fact, Pakistan survives on smuggled oil from Iran. Nearly $1.02 billion worth of Iranian petrol and diesel was illegally transported into Pakistan in 2023 as per reports. It makes up about 14% of Pakistan's annual fuel consumption, and this helps Pakistan's economy by saving forex reserves, the smuggled oil. So who would be a sweeter partner to Trump, India or Pakistan? US total goods trade with Pakistan was estimated at $7.3 billion in 2024. India-US bilateral trade now stands at $130 billion. Yet he went on to go and have a deal with Pakistan first and imposed only 19% tariffs on the country. So what this tells us about Trump diplomacy is that sell Trump a Nobel Prize dream and fake oil reserves, massage his ego, give him all that he wants, and he will crack a deal with you and put you in the good books in front of the entire nation. Trump has released shocking details on Epstein Island and his relations with Jeffrey Epstein. He says that he never went to the island and also accused two high-profile people of going there over 20 times. Remember the Epstein client list? That's what I'm talking about, which the administration claims doesn't exist, but Trump was supposed to release it, and that split the MAGA team into two. His supporters, including one of the closest ally of Trump, Joe Rogan, destroyed him over Epstein's silence. He accused Trump of gaslighting his supporters over how his administration handled the information linked to Jeffrey Epstein. So what did Trump say? Here's a report.
In a candid and revealing exchange with reporters this week, U.S. President Donald Trump addressed, perhaps more personally than ever before, the circumstances that led to his falling out with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. While sitting beside British Prime Minister Keir Starmer during his visit to Scotland, President Trump said that staff were poached from his properties by Epstein, with employees who worked for him being taken. He claimed that Epstein was thrown out and declared persona non grata. Trump emphasized that this severance happened well before any criminal cases against Epstein surfaced, and he also said that he never visited Epstein Island. When pressed on persistent rumors and the scrutiny of his past association with Epstein, scrutiny that has been magnified by freshly unsealed court documents in 2024, he further clarified, for years, Trump had not spoken to Epstein because his actions were found inappropriate.
For years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help. And I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. I'm glad I did, if you want to know the truth. And by the way, I never went to the island, and Bill Clinton went there supposedly 28 times. I never went to the island, but Larry Summers, I hear, went there. He was the head of Harvard. And many other people that are very big people. Nobody ever talks about them. I never had the privilege of going to his island. And I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
He said that an invitation to Epstein's island was turned down by him during what he called one of my very good moments. He simply had not wanted to go. Additionally, Trump alleged that former President Bill Clinton and economist Larry Summers had visited the island, a charge that has drawn attention with the release of related documents. White House officials clarified that while President Trump and Epstein shared social circles in Palm Beach and New York in the early 2000s, the relationship ended long before Epstein's legal troubles erupted. President Trump insisted that the entire fake narrative regarding his association with Epstein is being driven by opponents, and wrongdoing is being implied where, according to him, none exists. When questioned about any attempt to distract from ongoing scandals with a trade announcement, President Trump responded that any such suggestions had nothing to do with it and could not be taken seriously.
Layoffs are back in headlines. Tech giants are now under scrutiny for layoffs this time. Tata Consultancy Services, an IT giant in India and Asia's largest IT employer, is the one causing it. TCS recently announced that it will lay off 12,000 employees, which is 2% of its global workforce. The reason? Skill mismatches and roles that cannot be deployed in current projects. Now, this has come under government scanner. Indian Labour Ministry has summoned the company executives over the terminations and delays in hiring. The move follows complaints from IT unions who say that layoffs are hitting mid and senior level staff and they were not done with prior notice, and the unions are calling it inhuman and illegal. Meanwhile, the company says that this is a skill mismatch and its CEO is earning 26 crore rupees a year, and this has also raised eyebrows. The debate is now around fairness and corporate responsibility in tough times. In the US too, Microsoft is confronting its own crisis. The company has cut 15,000 jobs this year alone, and the timing is striking because it is not about the cost. Microsoft released great earnings results with record high revenues and is investing $80 billion in AI infrastructure and partnership. At what cost? It's labor, human labor. There are allegations that Microsoft is firing American employees and hiring cheap labor from foreign countries. Reports suggest that the company made 4,712 applications for H-1B visas. Microsoft has responded to this claim by saying that the applications are no way related to the job eliminations because many H-1Bs have also lost their jobs. But the bigger concern is that are these layoffs replacing humans with AI? Well, some might be. In 2025 alone, over 94,000 jobs have vanished in the tech sector. While the companies don't want to admit that AI might have played a role in it, Microsoft, Meta, Intel, and many others have announced thousands of layoffs, citing restructuring on or investment in AI and metaverse and stuff. And the targets are mid and senior level workers because they are a whole generation of people who might not be able to adapt to AI centric roles. Now, what these companies want is people who know how to use AI better or know how to build an AI infrastructure. It impacts fresh graduates to senior level employees, and key to success is now not climbing the corporate ladder, but actually learning and adapting to technology to be successful in this age. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments. The Fed went against Trump's demands and kept the interest rates unchanged again. And there was an obvious response from Trump. On Truth Social, he called Powell too late, too angry, too stupid, and too political to have the job of the Fed chair. He accused him of costing America trillions of dollars in addition to quote unquote incompetent or corrupt renovations of a building in history of construction. So why did the Fed keep rates unchanged despite Trump's demands, and why does Trump want a lower interest rate? Here's a report.
During the Federal Reserve's meeting, the FOMC made headlines by keeping its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 4.25 to 4.5% on July 30th. But the real story? The first double board dissent since 1993. Out of 12 voting members, 2, Vice Chair for Supervision Michelle W. Bowman and Governor Christopher J. Waller, broke ranks, urging a 25 basis point rate cut. The majority, including Chair Jerome Powell, opted to hold steady. Experts weren't surprised at the dissent, as both Bowman and Waller had been vocal beforehand. As Governor Waller put it, private sector payroll growth is near stall speed. We should not wait until the labor market deteriorates before we cut the policy rate. Looking ahead, FOMC members remain sharply divided about what's next for 2025. 7 members foresee no cuts, while 8 are penciling in 2 25 basis point cuts each. According to the CME Group's FedWatch tool, 65% of market participants expect a cut in September, while 34% foresees rates unchanged at the next meeting. Just 1% are eyeing a steeper 50 basis point cut. Donald Trump repeatedly called for aggressive rate cuts, often using social media and public statements to pressure the Fed. He even sent a handwritten letter to Powell to cut rates aggressively to below 1%. Trump has repeatedly called Jerome Powell names on social media and in public appearances. Examples include calling him Mr. Too Late, knucklehead, and criticizing Powell for forcing his government to pay more to finance its deficits and leading to higher mortgage rates for potential home buyers. Trump has also linked the need for rate cuts to his self-described GDP success, claiming a 3% GDP growth warrants immediate monetary easing and arguing there is no inflation risk. Trump's criticism has not stopped at words. He has publicly discussed firing Powell as Fed chair. He has also leveraged operational issues, like a Fed renovation project, as supposed firing offenses. In response to these pressures, Jerome Powell consistently reiterated the Fed's independence. He stated that monetary policy decisions are based on data and the outlook for inflation and employment, not on political considerations or White House pressure. Powell affirmed, "We are committed to doing monetary policy in a way that serves the American people, and that means the economy, not politics, guides our decisions."
Gaza is suffering with the worst humanitarian crisis ever, but now the world's opinion is changing. They want this war to end. Even Israelis, for that matter, for the first time, a group of 31 prominent Israelis, including artists, intellectuals, and former political leaders, have publicly called for crippling international sanctions on Israel itself. They say Israel's siege and military campaign in Gaza is causing catastrophic starvation and threatens the forced removal of millions of Palestinians. Protests outside the US Embassy in Tel Aviv underscores growing shame and anger at home as Israel's biggest allies reevaluate their support. Europe is taking bold diplomatic steps. France, the UK, Canada, and Malta have all announced plans to formally recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September, joining more than 145 countries worldwide. So the US is not happy with this, it is only against it. Trump has warned Canada that the announcement will affect trade talks between the two countries, US and Canada. But what does everyone want? They want an immediate ceasefire and now are isolating Israel. European Commission has called the suffering in Gaza unbearable and indefensible, upping the pressure on Israel to halt military operations in the Gaza Strip. All this impacts Netanyahu, and his popularity at home has plunged. Polls show a solid majority of Israelis now have an unfavorable opinion of their prime minister. Most people want to end the Gaza war, demanding return of hostages and a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Hamas is facing the heat too. Arab and Muslim states have for the first time issued joint calls for Hamas to disarm and relinquish power in Gaza Strip. The 22-member Arab League, the entire EU and another 17 countries backed the declaration signed at UN conference hosted by Saudi and France this week. So who will rule Gaza now? The countries say Palestinian Authority will do it. They want PA to rule Gaza. Hamas must surrender for that. They have lost control over most parts of Gaza, but Hamas holds 50 Israelis hostage. And that is the trump card. So will the war end? Well, everyone wants Netanyahu to talk and resolve the conflict, get hostages out, but he continues to bomb the strip and the US politicians support this war. This week, the US Senate voted on a new resolution aimed at ending America's military support to Israel. All Republicans voted against it and even Democrats were split. US citizens, though, want this war to end, but not the politicians. So when will it end? It depends on Israel and US. And if the US is supporting Israel, the UN will not be able to pass a resolution to recognize the Palestinian state, which does not have a land or sovereignty because it is occupied by Israel. The recognition will not change much, but even if it does, and UN plans to take Palestine in, it would require the vote of all 5 permanent members. 4 have recognized the state, but US is still against it. So, well, looks like it depends on the US and Israel now to decide when this war will end. A massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake, 6th strongest in the world, hit Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula this week, triggering tsunami warnings across the Pacific, and waves reached Japan's northern coastline. The event was massive, with Russia, Japan, Alaska, Hawaii, and the entire US West Coast issuing immediate warnings of tsunami. It led to massive evacuations from Russia's far east to Japan, warning people to get away from the coast. The US West Coast saw waves between 2 to 5 feet. Hawaii saw waves up to 1.7 feet. Japan's Hokkaido and other regions saw minor waves and injuries. Now people are returning to homes after the alerts went off. The July 29 Kamchatka Earthquake shares the 6th spot for the strongest quake ever measured, tied with 2010 Chile earthquake and the 1906 Ecuador event. In 1960, Chile earthquake of 9.5 magnitude was the worst one, standing at number 1. Second was 9.2 magnitude quake in 1964 in Alaska. Then comes the 2004 earthquake in Indonesia with a magnitude of 9.1. Then the 2011 quake that hit Japan with a magnitude of 9.1. And then comes the Kamchatka earthquake and the Chile and Ecuador earthquake of 2010 and 1906. The damage is done now, but this ignited interest in a chilling prediction from a Japanese manga titled The Future I Saw, authored by artist Ryo Tatsuki, often referred as the new Baba Vanga of Japan. Fans recall that the manga warned of disaster in July 2025, and where the exact date passed without an incident, the earthquake has now sparked new online debate and conspiracy theories. This book, published in 1999, shows Tatsuki's depiction of a July 2025 disaster, particularly on July 5. But there was no major incident that happened on that day. But this earthquake brought the discussion back, with fans claiming that the timing might not be precise, but the month and the year was. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments, and like, share and subscribe to ET Now for more such news and views. I will see you in the next week.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.